In this video I will be replacing the rear bearing block and shaft on an Indesit 3kg Tumble Drier. Although the bearing block and shaft are pretty much the same over a large portion of tumble dryers made by Hotpoint, Creeder, Indesit, Ariston and a few other manufacturers as well, actually getting to them can vary from one model to another in regards to how the cabinet comes apart. So although we've already made a video on tumble dryer bearing replacement, this model is smaller and therefore the cabinet on it is slightly different. The tools used on this project were a pair of engineer's pliers, a large bladed screwdriver, a Phillips screwdriver, a pop rivet gun, an electric drill, a T25 Torx bit and driver, a multimeter and an old piece of cloth. Firstly, how do you know if the bearing is worn? Well, a good indication is you'll hear a scraping as the drum rotates, although not in the early stages. The truth is, until the bearing block has worn through to the metal, there is no easy way of telling other than looking, but if you hear this sound, it could well be the bearing. The bearing block is located at the rear of the dryer under this large panel, which is held on by 13 screws that have to be removed for it to come off. Here you can see the copper earth strip, which should be touching the metal shaft that is attached to the drum, but the shaft has cut through the bearing and into the cabinet. With the earth strip off, you can see the damage to the bearing housing. The cabinet is held on by 3 screws on either side, and there are 2 more screws at the front outer edge of the kick panel. Don't remove the other screws on the panel because it's not necessary. You'll need to remove the timer knob to get at the one screw holding the fascia panel on. So if you cover it with an old piece of cloth, then grip it with a pair of pliers, it will pull off easily without scratching it. When you've removed the screw, ease the panel up and it will unhook from the cabinet. Don't just yank it off because there are 2 wires attached to the half heat button which need to be removed. The spade connectors on this switch can be on quite tight and you may need to use a pair of pliers to free them. With the fascia out of the way, remove the screws along the top edge and the 2 either end. This will free the cabinet, which can now be lifted back and over the rear of the machine. Unhooking the belt from the motor is quite straightforward. If you turn the drum as you ease the belt off the end of the motor shaft, it will come off quite easily. The pin holding the collar on the drum shaft has to be bent straight at one end so it can be withdrawn from the shaft and allow the collar and spacing washer to be removed. This collar would usually come off quite easily, but because of the excess wear on the shaft, it's a bit tight and needs a bit of persuasion. Undo the screw holding the tie bar onto the rear panel, and this will allow the front and rear of the cabinet to be eased apart so the drum shaft can clear the bearing housing and the drum can be lifted out of the cabinet. But remember to open the machine door before attempting to remove the drum, because otherwise the door filter will prevent it. The drum shaft is held in place by 3 screws, which could be Phillips or, like this one, Torx head screws. Now you can see the full extent of the damage caused to the drum shaft as it cut through the bearing housing and cabinet. The rear bearing kit comes complete with all the parts needed to accomplish a full repair, but the screw holes in the shaft fixing plate may not be cut, so it would be a good idea to check first and, if needed, to cut the thread with one of the self-tapping screws before fitting. To replace the bearing housing, you have to remove the old one first, but the old rivets have a tendency to spin when you try to drill them out, so if you can grip the other side of them with a pair of pliers, it will make the job much easier. Use your rivet gun from the inside of the cabinet to fit the new bearing housing, or the tags on the rivets could rub on the drum as it rotates. When you've riveted the bearing housing in place, you can now lower the drum into the cabinet. But remember to first open the machine door or you'll have trouble getting it past the door filter. It's also a good idea to have the belt already on the drum before fitting it. When the drum shaft is in place, locate the front of the drum so it sits on the bearing pads at the front of the panel. This will sight it in the correct position before you replace the screw in the support bar, which will then hold the front and back of the cabinet together. Now fit the bearing block over the drum shaft. It may need a bit of persuading to fit. They don't all slide into place easily. If you had a spacing washer fitted, then you'll probably need to replace it with a new one before fitting the collar and pin. The pin can also be a bit tricky to locate into the hole in the shaft, and it could be that one of the cutouts in the collar may need to be adjusted for it to pass right through and out the other side. When it is in place, bend it in the opposite direction as the other end to form a Z. This will prevent it from twisting or coming out when the drum is going round. The next part to go on is the copper earth strip, making sure it's in reasonable condition and touching the shaft. To fit the belt, you'll need a large screwdriver or metal bar. Place it between the belt and the drum and hook it under the drive shaft of the motor. Lever down on it and you'll be able to slide the belt off the screwdriver and onto the motor shaft. Turn the drum a few times to align the belt up with the previous markings left from where the belt fitted before. Refit the cabinet from the back. It can be a bit awkward and needs some jiggling about, but it is the most straightforward way for it to go on. When it's in place, refit the screws at the front first, starting with the top and bottom ones on either side of the panel. You can then continue with the others along the top of the cabinet. Before you replace the fascia panel, make sure the wires to the half heat button have been connected. Because it's just a 2-wire switch, it's not important which terminal they connect onto. The 3 little brackets on the fascia panel hook into slots in the cabinet, and the fascia is held in place by the 1 screw in the control knob recess. To complete the reassembly of the tumble dryer, refit the 3 screws on either side of the cabinet, and then replace the 13 screws on the back panel. Before you start the tumble dryer up, just give it a quick electrical continuity check to make sure the appliance is properly earthed. Turn the dial on your meter to the 200 ohm scale and attach one of your meter probes to the earth pin of the mains plug. Touch the other probe to any exposed section of the cabinet. You should get a reading of about 0.5 ohms, but because a large number of these meters may not be that accurate, virtually any reading will be adequate to identify a continuity reading. However, if there is no reading or the display stays at 1, then you need to check your earth connections. On behalf of Selfix UK, we would like to thank you for watching this video and hope you found it interesting. Goodbye.